Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Atlanta City Council District 5 Forum on the Decaturish Twitch show. I am your host, editor, and publisher, Dan Wisenhunt. The candidates on our show today are Doug Williams. Doug, how are you, sir?
I'm well. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Katie Kissel. Katie, how are you?
Living the dream, Dan.
Thank you, Katie.
Mm-hmm.
Liliana Bakhtiari. Liliana, how are you today?
Doing well. Have my coffee, so I'm happy.
Amen. Mandy Mahoney. Mandy, how are you today?
Well, good morning. Thank you for having us today.
Thank you for joining us. And Samuel Baycoat. Samuel, how are you today?
Thank you, Dan, for asking. Doing quite well. One of the best days of my life.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that.
It's always a pleasure to be in the company of these distinguished people,
Yeah.
the other candidates. Yes.
Great. Well, I'm glad. Okay, so all of our coverage is going to be found at decaturishvotes.com. So if you missed this forum, we're going to have a story about it afterwards. We're going to upload the video to YouTube and add that later. If you appreciate this forum, if you appreciate the opportunities that we're providing everyone, there's a little ad to the right there. It's supportmylocalnews.com. Please visit, sign up to become a paying supporter. $3 a month, any amount helps. That helps us to pay reporters to write about these things, pay reporters to go to City Hall, keep journalists employed and covering things that you care about in your community. So with that out of the way, I'm going to give each candidate a 2 minutes to make an opening statement. I'm going to be keeping time, and then we're going to launch into our questions, and we are going to rotate who leads off on the questions. So with that, Doug Williams, 2 minutes to make your opening statement.
Hi, y'all. My name is Doug Williams, and I have given over 10,000 hours of my life in community service to District 5 with over $1 million in improvements and accomplishments to show for it. I've served the community I wish to represent by working with city, county, state, federal, and private partners, and helped do everything from leading the renovation and restoration of our parks, working to make our roadways safer, founded and led a not-for-profit farmers market and urban farm to make healthy food accessible for low-income families, and participated in led the planning for multiple business districts within our community, which have subsequently been built out. I have more accomplishments for the district and the people of the district and more experience doing the things that I've promised I will do than in running in this race. I am running for this seat because it's the greatest opportunity to do the most good for the most people in the community. The city council person has the potential to hold together the visions of the community groups and the NPUs as they implement their plans. These are run by volunteers, and with turnover, it can be easy for our neighborhoods to lose track of what their changes are and the progress they're making. And I want to help hold everything together and be the fulcrum that leverages relationships with public and private partners to help our community realize its goals and visions. I've done this work repeatedly in my time, and I'm uniquely qualified to bring together our neighbors, set goals, identify challenges, overcome our obstacles, and realize our vision together. I've done what I'm promising to do at some level already, and I have the receipts to show for it. I hope to earn your vote this fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Katie Kissel, 2 minutes to make your opening statement. You're on mute, Katie. 2 minutes. Hold on.
Hi, I'm Katie Kissel, and I am a Kirkwood resident. I am president of Kirkwood Neighbors Organization. I also serve on several boards, including HAY, Helping Empower Youth, Unearthing Farm and Market. I'm a legal observer with the ACLU, and I actually have to work for a living in addition to doing all those things to support my family. I have two young children, Gus and Charlie. They are both attendees at our local traditional public school here in the district, Toomer Elementary. And I work hard for this neighborhood and for this community and for this city. I have a proven track record of leadership. I am the only candidate that is an active neighborhood leader. I am here to show that we can move this city forward. We can do so in an authentic and honest way by pulling back the curtains, by exposing transparency to our government systems, and that really brings everybody in. What I would like to accomplish is affordable housing for all, a more efficient and transparent government, and a greater investment in our infrastructure as a city, whether that is related to transportation or watershed management. So with those things, I have a proven track record that I can rely on to accomplish those things because I have worked closely with our city council, our MPU system, as well as, different city departments. So I look forward to being your next District 5 candidate. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for having me, Dan.
Thank you. Liliana Bakhtiari, 2 minutes to make your opening statement.
Thanks, Dan. Doug, I'm not having any internet issues, so might want to just restart. But hi, I'm Liliana Bakhtiari. I have lived in this district for the past 15, going on 16 years, but have a longer track history in the district than that. I actually started working in shelters in the district when I was 5 with my dad. And then I started marching in the streets with him when I was 8. And shortly after that, started working at his pharmacy right across from the Auburn Curb Market down the street from Grady. So my whole background and everything I've ever done is rooted in mutual aid work, in nonprofit and crisis relief work. So that is my entire background. I've been working around affordable housing issues, direct services with the homeless population, doing a lot of work around affordability and issues that stem out of deep chronic poverty for a majority of my life within this district. I have worked in 26 countries around the globe, doing my giant senior dog just knocked over a giant cup of water. So I've been doing this work for a very long time. My whole purpose in running, because I ran in 2017, obviously came within 247 votes, but the intention of running is to create more proactive legislation that first represents our most under-resourced populations first, because when our most overlooked people in our community are actually represented, there's a trickle-up effect. And for too long, the city government, our Atlanta city government, while we have a very progressive city, we have a fairly regressive city council that needs to be more proactive in shaping legislation, especially as we go into this time of extreme change, which is very exciting. But the thing is when you sit on the precipice of extreme change, the risks become extremely high. But at the same time, you have all the resources you need to actually take your city to the next level. And the fact of the matter is, as was mentioned before, we are in the middle of a housing crisis. We are backlogged billions of dollars in infrastructure changes, and we have a lot that we need to do. I'm running for the seat because I want to proactively shape our city, and I want to be part of the solution. And I believe that I have the experience and the resources to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Mandy Mahoney, 2 minutes to make your opening statement. You're on mute. Okay.
Thank you. Good morning again, everyone. I'm Mandy Mahoney. I'm an East Lake resident, and I have deep experience in our community. I also have deep experience in government and policy, and I love driving collaboration across government, philanthropy, the nonprofit sector, and academia. So I've been in the city of Atlanta and DeKalb County since I went to Emory for undergrad, and this city captured my heart. I realized that as a young person, I would have the opportunity to do some really cool things. And that manifested in being on the team that launched the Beltline in 2005, and then working for Shirley Franklin. I was the city's first sustainability director. And for the last 10 years, I've run a nonprofit that's based here in Atlanta called the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. And that nonprofit works to collaboratively address and advance affordable housing policy, clean energy policy, and climate policy. I also, in that parallel to that grass top policy work, I've remained very deeply involved in the community. The most meaningful recognition I've ever received was earlier this year, when the East Lake YMCA recognized me as their Volunteer of the Year for the work that I had done throughout the pandemic to address food insecurity. And I got to work along some really amazing community members to ensure that our seniors and people that were out of work had access to fresh food every day. I continue to serve on the East Lake Y board, and we've actually just celebrated our 20th anniversary. And it is joyful work to be involved. And what I love the most is being able to collaborate to drive win-win solutions in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Samuel Baycoat, 2 minutes to make your opening statement.
Yes, good morning all, and I'm Samuel Baycoat, and I live in the Glenwood Park Homeless Association, where I'm vice president in the North Ormwood Park section of District 5. I'm a native Atlantan. I was born and raised on the west side of town. I lived, though, my adult life on the east side, on this side of the city. So I can say I know the city kind of both old and new. It's rapidly changing. I want to be a part of making sure that as it continues to change, that we have effective leadership in place. And that's why I'm running. I see in District 5, which I love so much, it's probably the most diverse district in the city with needs across the board that are diverging, but it's robust. It's growing tremendously. We got to find ways to balance that growth such that we protect what I call the culture or the legacy of District 5, but also find ways to welcome new things, new people, as an example. And that's an important issue. Again, this growth that we're experiencing and making sure that it's right fitted for District 5. I've been fortunate enough, again, having, like I said, been here most of my life. I did live away for a decade, but most of my life here. Been fortunate enough to be behind the scenes, I'd like to say it, in serving this community and helping it prosper. I've also been able to be appointed by 4 different mayors, 3 different county commission chairs to various boards, authorities, and the commission, usually in what I call organizational leadership type positions where I am chair or CEO as an example. And this is one area that I think people have interest in. I'm the former chairman and CEO of the Atlanta Land Bank Authority, where for over a decade I worked with nonprofit developers on trying to address the affordable housing issue in the community. I'm also former chairman of what's called PCCI, and that's Project Community Connections, Inc. And that's a homelessness resource center that's designed to place to help that part of our population, find a path to affordable housing. So I look forward to representing District 5. Hope I earn your support between now and then. And thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you. So this is the Decaturish Twitch show. We are here with the candidates for Atlanta City Council District 5. If you have a question for our candidates, go ahead and create yourself a Twitch account, give us a follow, and drop your question in the comments, and we'll add it to our list. The next question is going to start, our first question is going to start with Katie Kissel. So Katie Kissel, you'll have 2 minutes to respond to this, and then we're going to kick that question to the rest of the group. Doug Williams is having a little computer trouble. He will be restarting and joining us in just a moment. Katie Kissel, the Atlanta City Council recently approved the controversial Cop City Training Center leasing 350 acres to the Atlanta Police Foundation for a police training facility. What is your opinion about this decision, and if you are elected, will you work to reverse this decision? 2 minutes.
Yes, so as I had mentioned previously, I am president of Kirkwood Neighbors Organization, and I did lead an effort to pass a resolution that was voted on by Kirkwood Neighbors Organization in opposition to this police training facility. There are so many things wrong with it. I don't even know where to begin. Questioning the fundamental whether or not our police training facility needs to be an 80-acre facility, which is larger than New York and LA's facilities combined. Whether or not we need to have that facility directly in the South River Forest old prison farm property, where that property had already previously been promised to the residents of the city as a protected green space. Whether or not the whole lack of engagement that is, the entire lack of an engagement and an outreach and engagement process in order to get this passed through at a breaknecking speed. The fact that this facility, we don't even know how much it's going to cost our taxpayers. Excuse me, Doug. I think
Doug,
I'm getting a little bit of feedback from you. Thank you. There's just so many things wrong with it. And the fact is that it was passed through very quickly on purpose by the Atlanta Police Foundation. And I ultimately completely oppose the process that happens, because we already do not have trust in our government. And this just furthers the case that people don't trust the Atlanta city government.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Liliana Bakhtiari, same question to you. The Atlanta City Council recently approved the controversial Cop City Training Center, leasing 350 acres to the Atlanta Police Foundation for a police training facility. What is your opinion about this decision? And if you are elected, will you work to reverse this decision? 2 minutes.
Yeah. So first, I've been working on saving the old Atlanta prison farm for a number of years. And first, also to say that we all acknowledge that police and fire are in desperate need of a training facility. Their conditions, they're nearly 1,000 understaffed each. Their conditions are poor, competitive. There needs to be more pay studies, all of these things. Majority of us acknowledge all of that. However, the way that this was done, first of all, it's been an under the table conversation for about 6 years. There has not been community transparency around this at all. Atlanta is becoming a climate refugee city. We obviously have a number of environmental issues that we need to tackle. The claims that the old Atlanta prison farm was not a real forest because of invasive species is completely unfounded. The fact that we cite that it's a brownfield site. Sam himself can tell you that Glenwood Park used to be one, and we repurposed it to a beautiful neighborhood with its own wastewater catch system. Like, there are so many opportunities to repurpose the space for so many other things, and the community had already put that input in. The other piece around this is that area is predominantly surrounded by lower income families that are Black and brown, many of whom are non-English speaking. There was no process by which we engaged the community in any way, shape, or form. The Atlanta Police Foundation took lead. And while it's great that they want to put, the resources first, you cannot bulldoze things like this into a community that are going to affect lives for decades to come. We already know that a lot of the gases, a lot of the things that they're talking about training with are releasing, are actually linked to issues with health, with pregnancies, with a number of things, not to mention the sound issues. A lot of the promises that were made cannot be kept. And a lot of them need a lot more time. This is very reactionary planning. And right now, the biggest thing to push forward in a time where we're seeing an uptick in massive violent crimes is to be promoting more community trust, as Katie mentioned, because the fact of the matter is that you cannot move forward in a unified way as a city if the community does not have trust within its municipal process. People will take things into their own hands. They will not work together, and things will fall apart. So we have to be working to rebuild that trust.
Thank you. Mandy Mahoney, same question to you. Atlanta City Council recently approved the controversial Cop City Training Center, leasing 350 acres to the Atlanta Police Foundation for a police training facility. What is your opinion about this decision, and if you are elected, will you work to reverse this decision? 2 minutes.
I do not think it is the right site. I do believe that we need a police training center. The current site is temporary because they were in a condemned elementary school. We need better, and we need more for our officers. Employee morale directly goes to retention. And as Liliana said, we are down a tremendous number of officers. Therefore, we do need to put better training resources in place. In parallel to that, we also must use good policy in making all decisions. And this was a study and not good process for making this decision. The lease reads that the mayor will have the ability to cancel. So it'll be incumbent that I work with the next mayor to look at different sites for the facility. That said, it is very critical that we identify resources and funds. The reason that the Honor Farm prison site has stayed the way it has for so long is because the quantity of money it's going to take to rebuild that site so that we address the environmental justice issues, both on the toxicity of pollution as well as the combined sewer overflow issues, is real. So if we choose to move the site, we are going to have to actively look for significant funding to be able to repair and restore that site to address the longstanding environmental justice issues that exist at the site now. Thank you.
Thank you. Samuel Baycoat, 3 minutes for you. 2 minutes for you. The Atlanta City Council recently approved the controversial Cop City Training Center, leasing 350 acres to the Atlanta Police Foundation for a police training facility. What is your opinion about this decision, and if you are elected, will you work to reverse this decision? 2 minutes.
Thank you for the question. And I very much agree with my fellow candidates. First of all, I would certainly work hard to reopen the process. I think it needs to be reexamined. I don't think that the process that as was followed that took place that led to the vote by the council was very transparent at all. I'm going to also say I'm a supporter of the police. I do believe, as has already been mentioned, that police need to find ways to reinstill confidence in the community. One of them is addressing, of course, the staffing levels. Another is equipment that they use. And then finally, of course, training. So they do need to be trained differently now, especially in areas like de-escalation. So we've got to find ways to help our police, again, reinstill that confidence back and the trust back in the community. This just did the opposite. The way that this was done and rushed through, it was a step back for the entire community, and I believe for the police force. Now, I know the fire is also involved with this, the fire department, but it's been labeled Cop City, and so everyone thinks about police first and foremost. So I was very disappointed, in particular, I mentioned transparency, in how information was shared or not shared, actually. I participated in some of the Zoom calls and when it was presented, and one of my questions that just didn't really get a good answer was the alternative locations. I never quite understood why even this location was above all the others that were looked at. All I heard was anything above 10 acres and city owned, and that was, or possibly even others, but that was looked at, but I never got a sense of why this was ranked above others. I would certainly like to have that information shared with the community, because that could certainly answer some questions that all of us have about why this was chosen and why whatever the second location, why wasn't it chosen, or and what it would take to make up the difference between, okay, thank you, Dan, take to make the difference between why the second option could become perhaps our top option. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you. Doug Williams, same question to you, 2 minutes. The Atlanta City Council recently approved the controversial Cop City Training Center, leasing 350 acres to the Atlanta Police Foundation for a police training facility. What is your opinion about this decision, and if you are elected, will you work to reverse this decision? 2 minutes.
Yes, I will work to reverse this decision. I have been talking all throughout this campaign about the need to repair the relationship between law enforcement and the community. Too many people don't trust the police. The police don't feel like they have the support of the community. And this decision has done more to create damage and more distrust for that relationship than anything I've seen in recent history. Following up on last summer, we need to be building relationships with the community and building support and trust. And they've just basically thrown that away for political expediency because they could. There's been a lot of false statements made in regards to the current safety issues and how this training facility was going to impact them. That wasn't true. We need to start over the process. Across the board, our city has a problem with transparency and communication to the citizens, and this entire process has been reflective of a lack of respect for the community and a lack of respect for the input of people impacted by this. We definitely need to go back to the drawing board on this. We do need a new training facility. We do need support for our police, but we shouldn't be pushing this through for expediency at the expense of the relationship with the community.
Thank you. So our next question is going to start with Liliana Bakhtiari. The question is, what is your plan to reduce crime in the city of Atlanta? 2 minutes.
Oh God, 2 minutes to reduce crime in Atlanta. Okay. So I think one of the things is obviously meeting staffing minimums across the board, because we're so understaffed with fire and police, not to mention our 911 operators, in which we have about 100. And we also need to label them as first responders, because at our busiest hours, we only have 4 to 5 people working 911 at a time, which is why some of our wait times are up to 80 minutes now. So improving those staffings across the board, bringing back competitive pay, step increases, looking at introducing a COLA program, because we need to have retention. We need to double workforce housing so that people can these first responders can actually live in the communities that they serve, so that we're actually lowering our attrition rates and making sure that people don't have to commute an hour into the city in order to serve the city. In addition, we need to expand upon PAD, which obviously I also believe needs to be coupled with 911 instead of 311. But we need to be creating a city contract with them so that we can actually give them full funding, make sure that there's a 24/7 hotline, also work to make sure that they're able to answer issues in real time. And that way we're actually able to measure success on a client by client basis. In addition, we need to look at closing ACDC and turning it into a center with wraparound services, so that people that are experiencing mental health or poverty or other issues that are nonviolent can be diverted out of the prison system and actually put into a facility with wraparound services to set them up for success. And in addition to that, I believe one of the most necessary ways to combat crime is through job security and housing security. So making sure that we're doing things like expanding our missing middle housing, and also looking at workforce development and introducing that into our public educational system, so that we're setting up kids for success. But the fact of the matter is that right now, according to Atlanta Police Foundation themselves, we have about 300 repeat violent offenders that are responsible for about 40 to 45% of the crime in the city, and we need to be also going after them. So, yes, that is my time. Thank you.
Mandy Mahoney, same question to you. What is your plan to reduce crime in Atlanta? 2 minutes.
Crime is one of the gnarliest of problems. And in wicked problems like this, we know that it's exceedingly multi-layered. And so detangling that by looking at what is driving the crime? And so how do we support resources that address homelessness and mental health care? We currently are not making adequate budget to effectively resource organizations. We're not effectively collaborating with the counties that have the public health arm, and that has to change. We must stop operating in silos. And that is one of my strongest areas of experience, is working with partners across issue areas. Second, we've got to look at the fact that we're asking the officers to do too many things. And so as we are trying to detangle and create officers that are specific staffing that can deal with nonviolent, such as traffic stops, versus officers who are going to deal with more of the violent crime, so that we have appropriate staff, appropriate technology, appropriate resources to meet the crime as it is manifesting. And then we have a management issue that is going to require significant executive leadership in the next police chief that the mayor will appoint, so that we have better morale, so that we have a force that feels like that the chief has their back, and that we can change the culture into a spirit of confidence where people enjoy going to work. That creates a strong workforce. It attracts quality and it retains quality. Thank you.
Thank you. Samuel Baycoat, same question to you. What is your plan to reduce crime in Atlanta? 2 minutes.
Sure. Thank you, Dan. And I want to focus on two that I don't think have been mentioned by those who've gone before me. And one is the court system. Got to fix it. We got to find out what we can do about the revolving door there. And I'm really talking about the violent crime. I think that's the issue, the gun violence in the city. When people are getting out on bonds and not spending much time behind bars, and police are saying, well, they arrest someone and then within a matter of days or weeks they're back on the streets. That's a problem, particularly as it relates, like I said, to violent crime. If that is something going on, it needs to be fixed and addressed. The other is, we do know for the most part, especially when it relates to, like I said, the violent crime, particularly the gun stuff, who's committing that? I believe we do. I hear that we do, and I'm sure that officers know. And we've heard things like there are just 20 or 30 people who are committing these crimes that are out there. We need to go sit down with them, actually. There's a program in Chester, Pennsylvania, that's about creating safer neighborhoods where officers literally go and talk to gang members, or at least those are the gang mentality, and start offering what they call the carrot stick approach. They're offering them things like parental assistance. They're offering them things like job training. They're offering them things, again, that can make their lives more productive. And lo and behold, guess what? A lot of those criminals, or at least those in gangs, are taking up on that, and that they're actually being involved, becoming involved in things like training, and they're putting the guns down. And so, the example in Chester, the gun violence has dropped significantly there. I think steps and tactics like that should be deployed by the Atlanta Police Department, and I would certainly work with our police department when I'm on council to start looking at those kind of creative ways to engage and become more involved with those we know are out there who've kind of gotten lost and turned to crime for reasons that have been mentioned already: lack of housing, lack of jobs. Got to address those too. And I think that's a way to do that. Go and find them and start talking with them. We should have, back in the 70s, like gang summits, where the police would just literally sit down and have them come and talk about what's going on in the community, try to get them to put the guns down. So a return to things like that, I think, can address particularly the violent crime issue.
Thank you, Samuel.
Sure, certainly.
Doug Williams, same question to you, 2 minutes. What is your plan to reduce crime in Atlanta?
We have to repair the relationship between law enforcement and the community. We need to humanize that relationship and have law enforcement once again be part of our community. And we need to provide consistency to the officers so they have the same expectations in doing their job from one week to the next, regardless of what is happening in the media or what is politically popular. We obviously need to fully staff police. We need to increase community policing so that the people working in the streets actually know the communities that they're working in. We also need to provide housing support so that we don't have a police force that's coming from the suburbs and working like an occupying force, and rather need to be understood and living as neighbors in our community. We need to focus our crime efforts specifically on the individuals who are committing the crimes. Luckily, in our area in District 5, we mostly are dealing with nonviolent crime. The last time I worked on crime issues with the city and we won awards for this, we focused on who was doing 90% of the crime, and we found it was down to 23 people. And those individuals, when we focused just on them, we saw a dramatic decrease in crime without a major police presence or increased police involvement in the community, other than just focusing on what they were doing. We won awards for this before. We can do it again, but we have to fix the missing pieces that have never really been addressed. The good news is we have police and alternative diversion. The bad news is it's only 7 to 7 Monday through Friday. It has to be 24/7. The 70% of our city jail is mental health issues. We need to deal with mental health issues. It's even higher than that when you look at drugs and alcohol. If we deal with those issues underlying as feeding our crime issues, we can get with a lot of the repeat offenders. A lot of them are addicts. We need to address the problems created by careless development. We basically have a large displaced population, and desperate people are making desperate choices. So if we're really going to get to this, we have to deal with housing issues, and we have to deal with workforce training. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Katie Kissel, 2 minutes. What is your plan to reduce crime in Atlanta?
I think I agree with many of the things my fellow candidates have said, so I'm going to take my time to do something a little bit different. I just got a phone call from my kid's school. I originally not answered it because it was an automated message. What it turns out was that this morning at my children's school at drop-off, there were two families. They got into an argument. And then outside of the school, they ended up pulling guns and shooting each other this morning. And so I want to talk. I work with youth in the city, so that's what I know. So that's what I want to talk about. I work with young men that are known as the water boys, infamously or otherwise throughout this city. And these are good kids. These are kids that I love, and they mean the world to me, and every single one of them has a gun. Because it's easier for them to get a gun than it is for them to get a high school education. It is easier for them to get a gun than it is for them to get a good, healthy meal. It is easier for them to get a gun than it is for them to have a safe place to sleep at night. And, teenagers and people who don't have the emotional tools in their toolbox to handle conflict resolution, and you have a gun and you don't trust the police because we haven't held our police accountable. I would like for everyone who is listening now to Google Jimmy Atchison and read about a young man who was murdered by a police officer 1 week before the Super Bowl, and see that we still haven't held them accountable. So guns and accountability would be the two things that I would do. Thank you so much.
Katie, before we move on, are your children okay?
Yeah, everyone is fine. There was no injuries. Everything is fine. It's just very personal and raw, and I think that that's true of all crime. It's personal and raw, but I'm not going to address that by increased police presence wouldn't have changed a thing in this.
We're all very glad to hear that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that update. Mandy Mahoney, the next question, we're going to start with you. The question is, the number of people experiencing homelessness has increased noticeably since the start of the pandemic. What can the city do to reverse this trend and care for our most vulnerable residents? 2 minutes.
We ran an experiment that proved to be good, and that was securing the Ramada to be able to get people into shelter quickly. Typically, it has taken people that work with the unsheltered 10 to 12 visits to get them to want to move into shelter. But when we had the Ramada, we saw that change. We saw it only take 2 to 3 visits because people knew that by the end of the week, they would have a bed. And I think it's very powerful that we are working as a community and the leaders in that sector to secure additional hotels that can serve in that same function, because we've got to have different layers to deal with this problem. And just like we talked about in public safety, we've got to put more resources towards mental health and substance abuse. And we need a variety of support resources so that people that are in different places in their lives can receive the resources that they need based on what they are struggling with. I think that the city also has to do a better job in their procurement and payment, because so oftentimes the city will give a grant, but then it'll be delinquent on actually getting those funds out to the nonprofits. And I can tell you, as having run a nonprofit for 10 years, cash flow matters. And when the city is supposed to pay in 2 weeks and it takes them 6 months, you can see that actually force you to close. And we have experienced that with homeless service providers in our city. So the city's got to take responsibility to run their business better so that we can be the partners that the organizations in the field need.
Thank you. Samuel Baycoat, same question to you. The number of people experiencing homelessness has increased noticeably since the start of the pandemic. What can the city do to reverse this trend and care for our most vulnerable residents? 2 minutes.
Yeah, let me just start. Again, I mentioned that I was chairman of PCCI earlier, and that's a homelessness resource center. And we often got caught up in that cash flow crunch that Mandy mentioned, where the city just wasn't providing the grant funding that we were counting on. So that's an immediate one. I think the city needs to be held accountable and responsible to making sure that those monies get out. What we did when I was at PCCI, and I think it's what works, is there are lots of agencies out there that are at least attempting to address homelessness in various ways and got different services. And it takes relationship building kind of across agencies to make a difference. PCCI focuses on really getting this pathway to permanent housing, was a little different, just addressing the guy that's on the street on the corner right now. But there are other agencies that we would partner with to get that first step taken, and then to monitor that individual between getting into some sort of wraparound service and then coming on to a point where that person could be permanently housed. We would work with apartment owners, which was a great thing at PCCI, who would provide, Mandy mentioned hotel rooms, but we actually had apartment owners who provide housing for our clients, and creating more partnerships like that. So it's a partnership situation across the board, from working with others who are in the space providing homelessness services, but also trying to find others who can provide the housing at the end. So we got to find ways to make those relationships better. But more importantly, the city, certainly needs to get its act together and address the issue of remitting payments when they're needed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug Williams, same question to you. The number of people experiencing homelessness has increased noticeably since the start of the pandemic. What can the city do to reverse this trend and care for our most vulnerable residents? 2 minutes. Doug, I believe you're muted.
He's frozen too, I believe.
Okay, we lost Doug. We're going to come back to Doug. Katie Kissel. The number of people experiencing homelessness has increased noticeably since the start of the pandemic. What can the city do to reverse this trend and care for our most vulnerable residents? 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways that we can tackle this issue, and there are different people on this call who have a variety of experiences and expertise in this issue. For me personally, I am a huge fan of the tactical housing movement. It is something that I have worked with personally with an organization called Mad Housers. We work to provide shelter for people, and we do so in an efficient and cost-effective way. It's not a answer for the long term, but sometimes you just need a short-term solution. You need people to be safe. You need people to be out of the elements. I personally have built a tactical home in my backyard and work to house somebody there as well. So I think that there's a lot of organizations, whether that be in-town ministries, Mad Housers, and a variety of organizations across the city that are already boots on the ground. I think we need to bring them to the table and hear what they have to say and then spend the money, right? Invest the money in the people that are already doing the work instead of trying to come up with some kind of solution that is individual to the city when there's already people who know what the solution is and help them accomplish it. I would absolutely definitely would like to see us put some more investment towards those organizations.
Thank you. Doug Williams, we lost you for a second there, but we're going to back up and give you your turn to answer this. The number of people experiencing homelessness has increased noticeably since the start of the pandemic. What can the city do to reverse this trend and care for our most vulnerable residents? 2 minutes.
Thank you. We've got to have wraparound services for the homelessness issue. For one, we're a city where it's easy to live rough most of the year. We're always going to have homelessness. We're always going to have the homeless. We need to act like it and deal with it appropriately. There are two major issues that we're dealing with. There is about 75, talking with groups like Hope, about 75% of the homeless population is actually temporarily homeless, but HUD resources don't come in until you've had a year worth of homelessness or 1 year over three-year period. So we need additional resources to keep people from becoming homeless or to quickly rehouse them and get people back on their feet as quickly as possible so a temporary situation doesn't become permanent. Beyond that, about 25% of the population seems to be people who are dealing with chronic homelessness. And with that, you're dealing with a lot more mental health issues. People think of it as tied to drugs, but a lot of the drugs goes back to untreated mental health issues. So we need to have mental health support, to wrap around support with people who are dealing with homelessness, have shelter first as the priority. The hierarchy of needs starts with a safe shelter. If you give people a safe place to be, everything becomes easier. With that, you then need to add wraparound services for mental health, for treatment, for basically food, for basically all aspects of life, and realize for many of these people, it's going to be an ongoing issue, but it's not going to go away if we don't take it seriously. But if we do make the adequate resources and investments, we can make this something that we deal with a lot better than what we are. But it involves taking responsibility for our people and not just having a city that works for those who have money, but making sure that everyone is able to be cared for, because at the end of the day, we really are our brother's keeper.
Thank you. Liliana Bakhtiari, same question to you. The number of people experiencing homelessness has increased noticeably since the start of the pandemic. What can the city do to reverse this trend and care for our most vulnerable residents? 2 minutes.
I've been working in direct services in Atlanta since I was a kid. So I have watched and witnessed people die on the street that we were trying to get services for. Just this past winter, Mr. Polly froze to death on Edgewood Avenue because all the bars were closed and nobody could get him assistance. It starts with the city actually caring. And frankly, right now, my opinion is that they don't. I've never experienced a city care about its homeless population, unsheltered or sheltered homeless. And there's different kinds of people who are homeless. And so I actually lived out of my car on and off for 5 years when I first came to Atlanta. And I remember running the first time and people telling me that wasn't real homelessness. So one, people have to get the stereotype of what that looks like out of their heads. And the city needs to do the part of humanizing what that is and educating the public on what that is, and stop trying to say that you have to prove yourself first before getting into a housing situation. So we don't have a housing first model here. We have no low barrier shelters. Mandy brought up the Ramada. I was part of the team that set that up. That was the first low barrier shelter attempt in the city. And it did not go well because nobody was trained in the city on how to conduct a low barrier shelter. And so one of the things we have to do first is a housing first model, building low barrier shelters. Yes, wraparound services for addiction instead of penalizing it. The most I've seen done around codifying anything around a homeless population is making harsher sentencing for panhandling. And most of our shelters require an ID or payment to get in. And if you're homeless and you don't have an ID, then you have to find your birth certificate. We don't have easy pathways to any of this. I have in the number of women that are raped on the street or assaulted or end up dying because of harsher conditions. And right now, Grady can't even take anybody in because there's so much overspill from COVID. So it begins by creating more pathways and also vetting the shelters that are in place, because Peachtree and Pine, which people love to cite, was terrible conditions. I stayed there. They had their own TB pandemic. There are people that were living there that hadn't been to a doctor in 20 years. So it's also vetting and raising the standards of what that looks like, and also educating the public on how to identify someone and help, and also giving them the resources that they need to be able to get off the street, and also better paying our caseworkers so there's not so much overturn.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question, we're going to start with Samuel Baycoat. And the question is, MARTA is undergoing a once-in-a-lifetime redesign of its bus network, a project in which the city's appointed board members will be asked to choose between a broad network that guarantees everybody some service versus a targeted network that provides a higher quality of service on a smaller number of routes. What type of network would you support? 2 minutes.
Let me first say that I think that the network that I would support would come from those who use the system, what they need. Let's really examine what's best for them. I think for so long, MARTA has been at least an attempt at truly a regional integrated system, but it's fallen quite short of that. It's very difficult. And I lived downtown without a car for several years, relied on MARTA to get around. It's very difficult to get from A to B. And that was a big problem that I experienced, and I'm sure that people are still experiencing that. So it's got to become a system that makes it easy for people to get from A to B, get to the hospital, get to their jobs, get to the grocery store. And right now it's so difficult. So I believe that we need to have more discussion about what works best for our ridership. So often I think the people who rely on the system aren't engaged in this process. So I would want to encourage MARTA to reach out. They're not doing surveying. I suppose they are, but they need to do more of that. And I would focus on equity too. So I wouldn't be trying to position MARTA where it's more service in certain areas versus another. It needs to be across the board, across the city, pretty equal when it comes to things like even bus stops, when it comes to the type of buses that are serving. We've heard, marginalized communities. Those need to be the same as the others are getting. We shouldn't be cutting back on services and cutting routes in those communities because we just think they don't want them. No, they need them because they need to get to work. So again, I think it's going to require more engagement to determine what's the best way. So I'm about people, riders first. So let's figure out what they want and what works best for them.
Thank you. Doug Williams, same question to you. MARTA is undergoing a once-in-a-lifetime redesign of its bus network, a project which will guarantee, in which the city's appointed board members will be asked to choose between a broad network that guarantees everybody some service versus a targeted network that provides higher quality service on a smaller number of routes. What type of network would you support? 2 minutes.
I think that we need to be planning for a large network that supports everyone with initial priorities on focusing on the individual who are receiving services and frankly not receiving very good services right now, and work towards accessibility for the entire city. We need to be looking at a citywide plan for transportation where everyone can use public transportation, where we have access for everyone, and we build it into our plans. The city appoints the members of the MARTA board, but they are their own organization. We need to be working in partnership with them. We need to have increased transparency in everything that we do as a city and to make it insistence that MARTA members are participating in that. Part of that goes with how we appoint members to MARTA. We should not make this something where it's a political favoritism job and the members of MARTA are the ones who've done favors for the people in the city. Too many of those relationships define how the city works, and we've got to break that cycle if we're going to have an increased transparency and create a city that works for all of our people. We need to include Beltline Rail as part of our planning with MARTA. We need to include and build our plans around having a transit system using rail as well as using a bus system. And we need to have complete transparency in how we build out that process.
Thank you. Katie Kissel, MARTA is undergoing a once-in-a-lifetime redesign of its bus network, a project in which the city's appointed board members will be asked to choose between a broad network that guarantees everybody some service versus a targeted network that provides a higher quality of service on a smaller number of routes. What type of network would you support? 2 minutes.
Yes, to answer your question directly, I would support a targeted network. I think that currently, what we are working with right now, you see certain bus routes that are going throughout the day and they may have one or two people. And frankly, that's not cost effective. And it's not really serving its purpose. Sure, we might have coverage, but if we're not actually serving the people, then what does that coverage do for us? What people want is they want consistent bus service. They want service that will they can show up at 4:45 and that bus will be there at 4:46. They want service that'll come, if they happen to show up at 4:47, there will be another bus at 4:57, right? That's what people want. People who use public transit, that is what they want. And in relation to a couple things, the once in a lifetime opportunity, the fact that we're talking about reworking the bus system as a once in a lifetime opportunity is just a complete show of failure uh, when it comes to the fact that we should be able to rework the bus system more than once in our lifetime. Also, I would just say that we actually need to have MARTA users on our MARTA board. Currently, as Doug had mentioned, our current MARTA board seems to be more about political favors than their actual experience and understanding of mass transit. As the only candidate who uses a bike as their primary mode of transportation, the only campaign promise that I make is that I will either take the MARTA bus down Memorial Drive or I will take my bike to City Hall when we get to be back in person. Thank you.
Thank you. Liliana Bakhtiari, same question to you. MARTA is undergoing a once-in-a-lifetime redesign of its bus network, a project in which the city's appointed board members will be asked to choose between a broad network that guarantees everybody some service versus a targeted network that provides a higher quality of service on a smaller number of routes. What type of network would you support? 2 minutes.
Yeah. So first and foremost, mentioning what was mentioned earlier about the ethics and transparency issue. First of all, there needs to be a MARTA board that's not just appointed solely by the mayor, and there has to be restrictions on how they're appointed. Because as it stands now, anybody can just buy their way onto the MARTA board. There's no restrictions on who has donated to the mayor, because obviously that's city appointed by the mayor only and executive appointed. And there needs to be more transparency in that process, and probably a vetting process instilled also by overall council. But the public should be involved in some form or fashion, because right now we get no say. So to answer your question, though, I think our top priority has to be overall accessibility. I think that it doesn't need to be a one-off, as we so often do things in the city. We can let MARTA do their job to focus on equity and access and the route designs, but the city can do is work around those routes to maximize efficiency and access within communities. So that way routes can achieve their maximum success and will be sustainable long-term. And we have the opportunity to work with ADOT to identify routes for dedicated bus lanes or priority signaling for buses on city streets. We need to push our city departments to make sure that bus stops are fully accessible through sidewalks and crosswalks. We also need to use, as next council member, I would want to use my platform to share more information publicly and encourage bus ridership throughout the district. And I would love to build a partnership with MARTA and work locally or work in tandem with MARTA to do a whole outreach and educational platform with the public so they actually understand the bus system. And as Doug mentioned, also expanding Beltline Rail. Beltline Rail now has put out extensive white papers. We know the funding, we own the right of ways in this district. We can start building, and we can do it on a shortened timeline, especially with all the federal money that is coming down. So it's not just the buses, it's also all the partnerships that we need to create around the bus system, overall accessibility, but also creating more multimodal connectivity and having more ethics and transparency around the process.
Thank you. Mandy Mahoney, same question to you. MARTA is undergoing a once-in-a-lifetime redesign of its bus network, a project in which the city's appointed board members will be asked to choose between a broad network that guarantees everybody some service versus a targeted network that provides higher quality service on a smaller number of routes. What type of network would you support? 2 minutes.
You ask about buses, so I'm going to answer about buses because I'm guessing you're going to ask us more transportation questions. Katie gave a spot on answer, in my opinion. We've been a one-car family since 2009. And when I worked at City Hall, I did take that bus route and train route that Katie's talking about. And one adage in public transportation is if you have to rely on a bus schedule, then the bus is then the system's broken. Because we need that consistency, knowing that the buses are going to come enough that it makes your commute possible. And that is not the case now. Therefore, I very much support the focused solution. We also have to recognize the world of transportation technology is changing. I've worked with MARTA in my most recent capacity on the electrification of their bus fleet. And the large heavy duty buses we're getting to shift over to all electric. But what we're also seeing in Canada and Europe is smaller circulator kind of shuttles, because in Atlanta, we know that the last mile is the perpetual problem. Well, we don't need giant buses for all things. Smaller, light duty, autonomous, as they get that technology together, can be wonderful solutions for circulating. And I do believe that as that technology cost comes down, that you will see MARTA embrace and look at additional technology that can be complementary. But for that to work, for us to have confidence in MARTA, we need to get them a win. And I believe the only way to do that is to have the focused investment.
Thank you. Next question, we're going to start with Doug Williams. Doug, what is the role of the MPU system in guiding future development and council initiatives? 2 minutes.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure, absolutely. What is the role of the NPU system, the Neighborhood Planning Unit system, in guiding future development and council initiatives? 2 minutes.
Currently, not much. It's supposed to be a board that weighs in and at one point was giving approval votes for what development decisions were going to be passed. It has been disempowered over the past two administrations to where it is largely an advisory board that gets ignored. It is the potential for community engagement and helping to understand this city as the thing that we run that is a reflective of our self-government. But we've turned it into something that the city ignores, and that's the first thing that I would look to change as a city council representative. One of the things I say a lot is that you can't necessarily make promises as to what you're going to do for city council if you don't know if you have 7 votes in the mayor. But one thing as a representative you can do is listen to your NPUs. Make sure that your vote reflects that of your community and that you use the NPU process and the NPU groups to engage the community as much as possible. One of the things that I want to do as a representative is take that down to the individual level with what I call a CPR or community performance review, where our citizens are allowed to engage and rank and basically grade the city's performance on an annual basis. And then we incentivize and reward citizens for that engagement. And that ranking and performance metrics are given to the NPUs to drive performance reviews of what we're doing and to drive direction for what the neighborhoods want, what the NPUs want. I also want to use the community development plan process to engage our citizens as much as possible in determining what our infrastructure is going to be, what our walking plans, biking plans, improvements to our parks, improvements to our community are going to be, and getting everybody to think as a cohesive unit. So that we've done this a little bit at the NPU level when I was an officer, so that Kirkwood, Edgewood, and Eastlake were working on a combined biking plan. We need to be doing that across the district so that everybody's thinking together and we can build out a city that works for everyone in the district, even if we have to wait for the city to get its act together.
Thank you. Katie Kissel, same question to you. What is the role of the MPU system in guiding future development and council initiatives? 2 minutes.
So I'd like to recognize that the MPU system is actually one of the reasons why I love Atlanta. One of the reasons why I started to get involved as president of Kirkwood Neighbors Organization, and in our specific NPU, the neighborhoods have have a lot of autonomy in terms of what they report out to the NPU. And it really provides this opportunity on a local level for people to have control of what happens. Unfortunately, as Doug mentioned, the teeth have been taken out of that system, as well as I think the other unfortunate thing that we have to look at is there is no investment that has been made in that system to make sure that it is equitable and that outreach is done to where you aren't getting just a very few number of people at these meetings and at these votes. So one of the things I have done as Kirkwood Neighbors president is really work on expanding that outreach, making sure that people across the city, or across the neighborhood, whether they're renters, whether they are working moms, whether they are someone who has historically felt marginalized within our neighborhood system, that they feel like they have a voice and that they can come and learn. And I just think that the MPU system, as it was created by Maynard Jackson, was a revolutionary system, and it is a system that will make or break our city moving forward. We will either choose to invest and expand and make it the system that changes Atlanta, or we will ignore it and we will go further into the inequitable city that we have become.
Thank you. Liliana Bakhtiari, same question to you. What is the role of the MPU system in guiding future development and council initiatives? 2 minutes.
I mean, what has been echoed, there isn't. The MPU system as it stands serves as an advisory board and has no teeth. And unfortunately, as we've talked about in the first question that you asked us, the lack of investment by the city into the MPU process, which was established under Maynard Jackson, has led to an erosion of community trust and a lack of accessibility. Again, Atlanta is a rare city in the fact that our MPU system could be awesome. We are a small town with big buildings, and we have a connectivity and a community here that is stronger than any city I've ever seen. So it really sets us apart. Our greatest resource are our neighborhoods, and we aren't giving them a platform. A lot of people are getting frustrated, losing faith in the neighborhood process, and they're taking matters into their own hands. Because the city isn't listening. And again, as was mentioned, there's a lack of investment, monetary and financial investment into the MPU process. So a lot of times the membership and the payment falls upon the neighbors, which creates inequity because people don't feel like they can have access to it. And we need to be making it more accessible. The city needs to actually put monetary support into these processes so that they can, rather than consistently in so many forms, putting the burden on neighbors, homeowners, renters, so on, that shouldn't be happening. People need to have there needs to be more accessibility and equity in this process. We need to be, rather than burning out volunteers who are doing this in what little free time they have, as Katie said, being a parent, having a job, all of these things, and still being KNO president, we need to be setting up people to not be burnt out. So we need to actually lift them up, make sure that we're funding the work that they do so that our neighborhoods feel like they have a say in promoting more. Basically, we also need to be running field programs to create more accessibility into this process, because a lot of people don't know when this is. ANCCI just put out the 10 recommendations for the MPU overhaul, which absolutely needs to be looked at, and we need to adopt those. So yes, because I'm getting my 10-second mark, I'll leave it there. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. Mandy Mahoney, same question to you. What is the role of the MPU system in guiding future development and council initiatives? 2 minutes.
I agree with all of the problems that my fellow candidates have shared today. Your question is specifically what is the role? What should it be? And so the role is to serve as a true advisor to lift up the community voices. And so I affirm that is what we should be using the MPU for. And then to solve back for, well, how do we allow it to be that in the current modern era of 2021. I think that CCIs did a great, thorough job of looking at what's working and not working. And that should be used to look at ways to upgrade it. But so much of this goes back to just the plain and simple. People are busy and they have busy lives. And so what I've seen work in Atlanta is when you have a paid staff person who can do the heavy lifting, then that allows volunteers to be the strategic advisors. And I think first and foremost, that's what we have to tackle. We have to create positions, the staffing positions, so that you could have someone at the council member level, for instance, that could work with Katie in her role, so that Katie's time can be used for the highest and best value, and that the staff person can do the heavy lifting. And I think that would take care of a lot of the issues that we've got.
Thank you. Samuel Baycoat, same question to you. What is the role of the MPU system in guiding future development and council initiatives? 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I think it starts, you mentioned council. I think it starts with the council person. Be one of us here. I think the council person needs to really make an earnest effort at listening before the council persons listen, to really understanding what those NPUs want when it comes to development. That council person in conjunction with the NPU should begin to help, I think, shape and set aspirational goals for the framework of development and design of those, whatever those guidelines are. And I don't think that's a process that works that well. I then think that it's up to the city at that point to take those guidelines that have come up from the NPU, vetted by and worked along with the council person to begin to set policy. And then I think when there is a development opportunity, I actually think that the city should make a recommendation and be completely transparent about it to the NPU. Let the NPU approve it, or not, but make a recommendation, kind of turning it upside down in a way. So it's not just an advisory board, but it's got some teeth now, but it's getting information that it needs to make a very informed and intelligent decision from the city. But it's based, again, on that framework that was established with the council person and the NPU. Whatever it is aspirationally, I mean, we need to get that set in stone and then design the policy around that. And then as developments come through, do they fit within that framework? And then go from there.
Thank you. Next question, we will start with Katie Kissel. What will you do to protect and restore Atlantis tree canopy on both public and private property? 2 minutes.
I would like to take just a second because I know the audience here is important and it relates to the last question, Dan. There is an app called Empowered, EMPOWRD, and it is an app that is a citizen engagement app developed by a Black-owned tech business here in Atlanta, and it has a lot to do with the MPU question that you had before. In regards to the tree canopy, I do want to, we are the city in the forest, and unfortunately, based on the changing heat maps, we can see that is fading for us. And it's an important part of our identity. And I think it's important. A lot of people have mentioned kind of this, these opposing sides of development and tree canopy, that these two things are in opposition, when actually I disagree. I think that these two things should and can work together. We need to make sure that we are developing in a way that is smart. We need to be concentrating our density, specifically in areas where it makes sense, whether that be around MARTA transit station, whether that be along major corridors, because the fact is that our city is growing extremely rapidly. We have, for every one home that is being built, we have 1.5 to 2 households that are moving into this city. And if we do not build in a dense and concise way, in a planned way, that will continue to sprawl and it will continue to decrease the tree canopy in Atlanta. Thank you.
Liliana Bakhtiari, same question to you. What will you do to protect and restore Atlantis tree canopy on both public and private property? 2 minutes.
Well, first change the culture of it's more time and cost effective to illegally take down trees and to, apologize later rather than ask for permission first, because nothing about the way the city is currently geared actually protects any type of canopy. In addition, putting more funding towards the abysmal 2% that we put towards Parks and Rec, because right now, as it stands, a majority of our green space is on private land. It's accidental. And once again, the city's lack of response and the idea, the culture of taking the path of least resistance has put the battle consistently between developers and homeowners. Because the city does not take an active stance. So again, they are not fully utilizing their platform to promote any type of protection whatsoever. We need to do things like actually push for a heat and energy vulnerability assessment, which the city has never done. So we have the data to back up battling things like the urban heat island effect, pushing for continued, like I said, pushing for continued revisions of the tree ordinance so that we remove loopholes, increase fees for developers to better discourage the removal of mature trees, actually promoting more education or creating more regulations around this like one-off tree piece that we do, because a lot of people don't understand the type of trees that actually promote canopy. You can't just take down an oak and then plant a bunch of smaller trees in place that aren't going to mature to a fully grown canopy. But we absolutely, as Katie said, and Maria supported, did a beautiful article on this. We can have all of this. We can have development. We can have our green spaces. We can have all of these things because we are in a housing crisis. And the biggest thing that we constantly hear is, what about the trees? The city, we just need to defer to the experts, create actual plans, and then stick to them. We have plans that we have paid a lot of fees for and we have not enforced. We need to strengthen the canopy regulations, but we also need to eliminate this idea that we can't have both. So that takes active planning, and it takes the data backing it up, and it takes the city actually listening to the experts that know what needs to be done to both protect our tree canopy and build more housing.
Thank you. Mandy Mahoney, 2 minutes. What will you do to protect and restore Atlantis tree canopy on both public and private property?
It is Climate Week internationally. And as we look at the impacts of climate on Atlanta, it's going to mean more rain, more often, increased high heat days, increased extreme drought. All that puts more stress on our trees. So we have to put firm limitations on developers so that they cannot cut down big trees. The incentives aren't working. We need firm, strict no's so that we do not continue to reduce the tree canopy. We also need to put more money on the public land into maintenance. We are at the absolute bottom of peer cities nationally on the amount of money that we spend on parks maintenance. We've got to find the cash to deal with that so that we can maintain the existing tree canopy in our public spaces. And then finally, something that does not get talked about, but needs to be, is what tree species are we planting? Because as we have a warming climate, the trees that will thrive here are not the trees that have been thriving here. That is not part of the conversation, but as we look at the replantings that we will do as the white oaks get to their 150-year-old max, and we have to think about what goes in their place, we need to be thinking also about what the right answer is for our future climate.
Thank you. Samuel Baycoat, same question to you. What will you do to protect and restore Atlantis tree canopy on both public and private property? 2 minutes.
Yeah, first of all, make sure that the TPO that's coming up, the new one that's going to eventually be with us, truly has a metric system so we can kind of get a better sense of where we are as it relates to tree canopy. I think, though, it really is going to boil down to just more engagement. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Ghana, West Africa, and I happened to work with a group of small-scale carpenters who were just going out and kind of randomly. I mean, it's a situation where you got to survive, and so you'll go out and chop down a tree to just, again, put food on your table that afternoon. But they didn't really recognize the consequences of what they were doing, and they were deforesting. And I just started a campaign when I was over there just to begin to educate them, to have that engagement about what they were doing and how, in the long run, they were hurting themselves. So we got to make sure that the public, we understand it on this call here. And I think all the listeners would understand it too, but there's still, I think, a big percentage of us out there, Atlantans, who don't quite get it. And I think more engagement is going to be needed to protect trees on, especially private property. And we got to find a way to help them too. There's going to be, I think, a need for providing funding in some instances. If you got people on fixed incomes who can't maintain trees or replant trees, and trees to come out and need to go back in, we got to find some sort of funding to help them keep the canopy up to where it should be. So I think, again, it's a combination of TPO with metrics, engagement, just talking more across the city about the importance of our canopy and what it's doing for us in terms of slowing global warming, how it helps us with the climate control issue. And then finally, we got to find money for it. We got to make sure that as we start to do these things, the replantings, making sure the canopy's there, maintaining the trees, that the money's there to help us do those things, not just on public space, but also private properties.
Thank you. Doug Williams, same question to you. What will you do to protect and restore Atlanta's tree canopy for both public and private property? 2 minutes.
We need to make this a major priority for the city, and we need to go back to serious penalties for violators and focus on canopy restoration. We can do this. We need to take an all of the above approach for a thoughtful, intentional plan for growth that includes density, that includes affordability, but also includes our tree canopy. We can, to quote the supporter report, we can chew gum and walk at the same time. As we're going to develop areas for increased density, we also have to have areas where we want to keep our forest and work on growing our upper and lower canopy across the city with intentional partnerships with Trees Atlanta, intentional partnerships with the parks. We need to establish areas for increased canopy at the upper and lower level. The more leaves, the more processing you have of pollution, the more oxygen production. We need to increase staffing for the city arborist and have staff protecting the canopy, as well as providing support for private property owners so that if they cannot care for their trees, we provide resources for that in the same way that we provide resources for other home maintenance issues. We need to really increase our city parks and staff funding. We have always found efficiencies in this department and use this as a way of building community engagement and ownership in our communities, as this is our common ground. I built my community organizing efforts originally around parks efforts, and I know that we can do this. I know it's one of the best ways of building community, and we've done this. We're known for being the city in the trees that reestablished our canopy, that managed to grow. Even as we had more cars, we were improving our air quality because we really focused on having a powerful tree ordinance that reestablished the canopy. We need to go back to that. We've done it before, but we have to have it as a priority where we put trees as important as development in certain areas and invest resources in the canopy with the same energy that we do towards building roads.
Thank you. Next question, we're going to start with Liliana Bakhtiari, and the question is, what should the city do with the jail known as the Atlanta City Detention Center? 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I think I answered this a little bit in my first question. So I believe that the Atlanta City Detention Center needs to be closed down as a jail and reopened as a facility with wraparound services. PAD has already made a really amazing presentation on what they think it should be done. They model it off of Harris County in Houston, Texas, as a facility that actually works with local municipalities, with the sheriff's office, with local police, et cetera, to divert nonviolent offenders and divert people who are experiencing mental health or poverty out of the incarceral system and actually put them into a facility with wraparound services dealing with trauma, assisting with job placement, housing, et cetera. Because right now in the city of Atlanta, we are not setting up people for success. We are not creating pathways to wealth building. We aren't creating pathways to job or housing security. And currently the excuse being used is that Fulton County Jail is over capacity and people are sleeping on dog beds, which is true. But as Doug mentioned earlier, a majority of the people that are in there are for nonviolent crimes. So a lot of them are experiencing mental health. A lot of them are in there for failure to appear for traffic court. A lot of them are there on some cash bail, even though the city of Atlanta has abolished it. Fulton has not. And so there's a lot of people that should not be in there. And as I said earlier, 40 to 45% of the crime in the city of Atlanta is conducted by about 300 repeat violent offenders. That's by the Atlanta Police Foundation's own data. So I believe creating diversified tactics to approaching people in our jail system that should not be in there and creating more pathways by creating ACDC into a facility with wraparound services will actually benefit and solve a lot of the issues we have around crime, a lot of the issues we have around recidivism, and a lot of the issues we have in punishing people for factors outside of their control, factors that we as a city have created. So that's what I believe should happen with ACDC.
Thank you. Mandy Mahoney, same question to you. What should the city do with the jail, also known as the Atlanta City Detention Center? 2 minutes.
I really agree with what Liliana has just shared. I think that it should be redeveloped to direct city resources towards the underlying systemic issues. Often, the reason that individuals are there are because of underlying systemic issues, and that's what we really need to focus our time and money on. I think that we should be investing less in incarcerating and more in resources that are compassionate and supportive services. Similar to how your question earlier about the increased homeless population, I believe that we have to spend more resources towards mental health and substance abuse care in our community. We are not the only city that struggles with this, but we do have a real problem as part of the prison industrial complex that exists in our country. And I think that so much of that also, there is a racial element. It goes back to slavery, and we've got to recognize and speak that and talk about how the systemic racism is manifesting and must be challenged. I also think it's important to recognize that if you're born into poverty in Atlanta, it's the hardest city to come out of that. And so oftentimes that puts people in places and making decisions that will end up getting them put in jail. And we know that children of parents who have been incarcerated are 6 more times likely to be incarcerated themselves. And so the ACDC is a great opportunity to repurpose and change how we're using those resources so that we can get at and interrupt the systemic racism and this vicious cycle of generational poverty, incarceration, which is just creating a lot of lost opportunity.
Thank you. Samuel Baycoat, same question to you. What should the city do with the jail, also known as the Atlanta City Detention Center? 2 minutes.
Yeah, let me start with the kind of the honest admission. We do have a problem in the city when it comes to social mobility. That's one of, I think, the greatest challenges the city faces. And so, to Mandy's point, if you're born in poverty, and maybe even Liliana, if you're born in poverty, 9 times out of 10, you're going to end up not having success, not moving from that. And so you oftentimes will turn to crime and then end up in our system. I completely agree with the idea that the ACDC complex should be turned into a more holistic center that addresses some of the roots of the problems we're talking about now. It may be a matter of timing, because I also am concerned about the inhumane conditions over at Fulton County at Rice Street. Most of those are brown and marginalized people. We've got to find a way to address that to the extent that ACDC, as an interim, if that can be worked out. I think that is a directional kind of way to go. It should not lead to anything permanent, though, because again, I think ultimately, to the points that have been made, that ACDC should be closed as it is now. We are out. The city, thank God, is out of the wholesale business of incarceration. I don't think we're ever going to go back there. Hope we don't. So if that's the case, let's make sure that asset that we have now can be repurposed. Again, I think it's a matter of time, because I want to also address the inhumane conditions, because again, the people who are there happen to be, like I say, brown and marginalized people who shouldn't be there anyway. But we got to find a way to make sure that they've got better conditions, to the extent that facility can provide temporarily those conditions to help us kind of get this thing right. I would certainly be wanting to at least look and consider that.
Thank you. Doug Williams, same question to you. What should the city do with the jail, also known as the Atlanta City Detention Center? 2 minutes.
I don't believe in completely closing it. We need a jail, but we need to reimagine its use and have the focus be on moving people out of jail and into services. We need to fund resources for dealing with the underlying issues that are feeding crime. We need to provide much more mental health services in this city and addiction resources. We can use the jail as a starting point of getting people into better care. And the focus needs to be, look, I come from a background where I know somebody who's committed, you name a felony, I probably know a person who's committed it out of my personal experience growing up. I attended a pretty horrible high school, and there are horrible people, but that's not the majority of what we're dealing with in crime in Atlanta. And our goal should not be to punish the majority of people who are currently incarcerated, to really focus once again on rehabilitation. There is a great need to help our citizens. We frankly have been a city that's so busy growing, we haven't taken the time to care for our citizens. We've been too busy to hate, but we've really been too busy to care. And we need to be a city that works for everyone, and that means creating opportunity for everyone to get to a level of self-sufficiency. That doesn't mean we're all living in mansions, but it does mean we can food, clothe, and shelter ourselves, and move from a position where if you're born a poor child in this city, you have about a 4% chance of moving from poverty to prosperity. And part of it is when you get caught up in the criminal justice system, you tend to stay there because we don't really provide resources or ways of people working their way back out. So we need to provide a lot more additional wraparound services for our people dealing with the incarceration system, and the jail can be a way of reimagining how that support happens.
Thank you. Katie Kissel, same question to you. What should the city do with the jail known as the Atlanta City Detention Center? 2 minutes.
Yeah, I would definitely like to see it be part of a diversion and recovery program. I just want to point out a couple things that are different. I'm sorry, Doug. Can you
Doug, can
mute
you
your
mute?
line?
Thank you.
Two things. Of course, there was a great article. Our friend George Cheedy has written an extent about this. The horrible conditions at Fulton County at the Rice Street Jail. It is. They are horrible. The thing is that we don't trust our city or our county or our government to do what is right, because historically they haven't shown us that they will. What is going on at ACDC and what we decide to do with ACDC is separate from Fulton County. Fulton County needs to address their issues, and we can support that, but that does not relate to one thing. One thing does not relate to the other. Just the same way that increased crime in Atlanta has nothing to do with a police training facility on the old Atlanta prison farm. The fact that Fulton County's conditions are deplorable has nothing to do with the plans for ACDC. These are two separate things, and I don't think a lot of people understand why some people go to one building and some people go to another. It has to do with the type of crimes that are committed. And for me, I am in full support of fully funding PAD, fully funding their plans to make ACDC a diversion and recovery center. I think that is what will help our city move forward in the way we need it to. Thank you.
And we are at the end of our forum. That flew by really quickly. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. I want to thank all of you for showing up to the forum today. We're going to give you each 2 minutes to make a closing statement, and we're going to start alphabetically, which is the most unfair system in the world, but there it is. We're going to start with Doug Williams. Doug, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. One of the greatest things about this role is that the city council representative at the district level, it's not a citywide role. You're not there to advocate for everybody in the city. You're there for a specific group of people, which in our case is mostly the East Side and mostly Atlanta and DeKalb. I've worked for our community for most of the past 20 years as a neighborhood president in Eastlake, as an NPU officer. I led and created a safety working group to deal with Atlanta and DeKalb safety issues. I led parks improvements to the tune of over $500,000, including writing and implementing a vision plan and creating the playground and renovating our community center. I founded a farmers market and urban farm to feed families and rebuild community and transform a corner known for crime into something that our community was proud of. And I helped secure the funding for the new animal shelter. So at every level of city and county and partnering with city or state government, I've been able to make improvements, even to the level of getting roadway improvements done. So I've not only talked about change, I've delivered it. And I'm not looking to just be a caretaker. I am looking to change the game from a system that works for the few to one that works for everyone. And I'm not raising money and making promises. I'm asking you to look at what I've done. I have delivered the goods. You can go and see the results that I've given. You can visit the Zabin Center. You can have a picnic under tree groves that I've planted. You can go adopt a puppy from a shelter that I helped build. And you can talk to families who are able to feed their children off of food that we grew at a corner that was known for crime. I have shown my time and love for this city by my actions, because love is not just say, it's what you do. And while we all love this city, I have poured my heart into making it work for all of us, because ultimately it is what we make of us. And I'm asking for your vote, because I know together we can make an Atlanta that works for everyone. Thank you. And I appreciate your vote this fall.
Katie Kissel, 2 minutes, closing statement.
Yeah, I think that we all love this city. I think that Doug is right when it comes to being a district representative. You know, you do have a unique opportunity to present constituent services, but I reject the idea that we are only meant to serve this district. City council votes on things that affect all of us. And this idea that what affects one part of the city doesn't affect another part of the city is the same idea that has certain people in the city thinking that they can de-annex and take their ball home and leave. That is not what this is about. This city is about coming together. We have the resources, we have the grit, we have the determination, and that is what I have done as the youngest candidate in this race, as a mother, as a working mother, as someone who has supported youth, as someone who has supported her community and is the only active leader in this race and the only candidate that uses a bike as their primary mode of transportation. I have shown my ability to do the work and I have shown my love for the community. And that is what I'm asking you to vote for this fall on November 2nd. Please go to katieforatlanta.com. That's Katie, F-O-R, Atlanta.com. And to learn more, to volunteer, and to help contribute. I thank you guys so much for your time. Have a good day.
Thank you. Liliana Bakhtiari, 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thanks, Dan. First, thank you again for hosting this forum. And as you can see, everyone on this forum is awesome. So the fact is that, again, yes, District 5 is I honestly believe that District 5 is probably, I'm biased, but I believe that we can lead the way for what the city can look like because of the diversity of this district that we still have, because of the diversity of income, because of the diversity of experiences, because of all of these things. And again, while we have an amazing constituent base here, lives do not end at district lines. And it is a district rep with a citywide vote. And we have the opportunity to shape our city equitably. So one of the reasons, I have run for this, again, as I said earlier, is to shape proactive legislation from the ground up. I have lived a lot of the hard experiences that we've talked about, living out of my car, staying in different shelters, having worked in this district since I was a kid, because I was raised in public service because of my dad and because of my family in general. The urgency of everything that we're talking about, everything we've discussed, we're 3 to 4, maybe 5 years out from becoming the next San Francisco. We have just caught up to Seattle in rental costs. We are in a housing crisis and a renter's crisis. We are the worst place to live on minimum wage. We have a lot to do. Everything we've talked about is of the utmost urgency. We always say that this election year is critical, but every year the stakes are the highest right now. And understanding that because of having lived that and shaping proactive legislation and dealing in severe poverty, because I've been on the ground doing mutual aid work for so long. And like I said, I ran in 2017, came within 247 votes, and I continued staying in the community. I've knocked on over 10,000 doors this time. It's about accessibility. Whoever gets the seat will have the hard task of humanizing different perspectives, but that is exactly the work that I specialize in. I'm running for this district because I believe we can lead the way for the rest of Atlanta, and I believe Atlanta can lead the way for what a progressive, proactive municipal government can look like in the South.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Mandy Mahoney, 2 minutes to make your closing statement.
It was wonderful to be with all of you today, and thank you to those who tuned in for this hour and a half. I love Atlanta, like everyone on this call, but I love it because it has given so much to me. And I know that there are so many residents who don't have that same story. It's the residents we've talked about who have been born into poverty, who have not had the ability to move out of it. And I find a deep sense of duty and responsibility to work on those hardest issues, which is what I have done for the last 20 years of my career, working here in Atlanta to address the deep systemic issues that we have. And I want to continue to serve in that capacity because I think that Atlanta is at a turning point. The Atlanta that I experience right now is an Atlanta that wants to grow up, an Atlanta that wants to shift away from being a city where we just tear everything down and build new things, but to really become a city of quality, where we look at maintaining quality trees, but we also look at building more units of quality, affordable housing, healthy housing, in which people can thrive. And we start addressing the deep systemic issues that don't allow for people to achieve their full potential as humans. And so that is what I'm committed to as a person in my daily life, and what I want to bring as the council representative for District 5, but also not only for Atlanta, for the Metro Atlanta and for how Atlanta works as a city within our state. So I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Samuel Baycoat, 2 minutes to make your closing statement. You have to unmute.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. Let me also say, I love this candidate field. I think we've got one of the best in the city. Just one of the best. And I enjoy listening to each of them so much. And I think we're well served. More so by me, but again, we'll be well served no matter what happens here. And I think it's evident because the District 5 is so diverse. I mentioned that earlier. And so the candidate field is too. And I think that's one of our strengths. We also need, though, to address what I fear is this continued spiralization of not everyone thriving in District 5. We've got resources out there, opportunities out there in District 5 that need to be leveraged so that everyone, no one's left behind, so that everyone experiences social mobility, experiences equity, experiences access. That's what's important to me. And I think a part of that, and really is about also what's going on here, this relationship building that we're experiencing now. We're building relationships. And I think it's going to take a council person who can build relationships, not just inside District 5, but across the council. We've talked about how the council requires 8 votes to get something done. Well, that means you got to build relationships there. I think I've demonstrated a history of building relationships, not with just my fellow candidates, but also with what will become, fellow council members and people, more importantly, people in this District 5. It's about you first, people first in the neighborhoods, but really people first. I leave my ego outside somewhere. I checked it long ago. And it's about listening to people first before I'm even listened to. I just am about it that way. I'm a servant leader. I want to make sure that District 5 becomes the beacon of all districts in Atlanta. And I think we can do that, working together collectively with each other here on the call at some point, like we're doing now, as well as going forward. But that's why, and I think if you go to my website, votesbaycoat.com, you'll see more specifics about things I've done, my vision for District 5. Again, that's votesbaycoat.com. Please visit that. I hope to earn everyone's vote, including my fellow my fellow candidates. Hope on everyone's vote on Tuesday, November 2nd. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate you.
Thank you. And a great reminder, and I should have said this at the beginning of the forum, the election is November 2nd. Early voting is going to start on October 12th. You can find information about all of those things at decaturishvotes.com. This is a great forum today, and I want to thank the candidates not only for all being here and all showing up, because that's what makes a really good forum, but also for your interest in public service. I'm really passionate about local elections and local government. I believe it is the most important government that we have because it's the government that's closest to us. And for those of you, not just in this race, but in any race, who have stepped up to put yourself out there to sacrifice your time, thank you, because we need you. And it's public service really is that. It's service, and it is appreciated. So this is the Decaturish.com Twitch show. This has been the Atlanta City Council District 5 Forum. Our next forum is going to be on Wednesday, September 22nd. We'll be talking to candidates for Stone Mountain Mayor from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. If you appreciate us, please visit supportmylocalnews.com. Become a paying supporter of Decaturish so we can keep doing forums like this. Until then, I'll see you tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Everybody have a good evening. Bye-bye.